Hello, everybody. It's John Kranz. I want to welcome you to episode 37 of Compass Games Live. Today is Thursday, July 30th, and we hope you're all doing extremely well tonight. Of course, we're excited because tonight we're going to be introducing a new pre-order game that will become available. As you can see here, Prelude to Revolution, Russia's Descent into Anarchy, 1905 to 1917. And we have the designer who will be joining us momentarily, Mike Willner. Looking forward to doing that. Also, I want to mention that our most recent game release is right here up above me, Brotherhood and Unity. I want to thank you all for the great feedback and posts on social media. We've seen a lot of some replay articles already, some reviews, a lot of pictures of people setting it up on their tables, and the feedback has been just incredible so far. So really happy to see that, and yeah, looks like it's definitely been worth the wait for everybody for Brotherhood and Unity. So we're really excited about that. And then we'll be going over our release schedule shortly. But as you can see here, just over my shoulder here is Red Poppy's Campaigns. That's Volume 3, Assault Artillery. And that will be our next release. We actually have 2 releases slated for August. So that's just something I want to talk about now. So on our home page, as you can see here, and I'll scroll up a little bit, just as I do every episode, as is customary, just want to remind you all that on the left column in that yellow box, you can just give us your email address and we'll get you on our subscriber list, and you'll get a single email from us once a week. We just sent one out this morning talking about the end of our Kickstarter and Attrition of Souls, and also our 2 releases scheduled for August, which I mentioned Red Poppies already over my shoulder here, and then Command and Colors Tricorn Jacobite Rising, which is a standalone game in that series. That will be our second release for August. And actually our intention is going to be continuing to release 2 games per month, and I think we've actually done that. I think Bill Thomas mentioned the last town hall. It's almost been 2 years now that we've been releasing 2 games, at least 2 games per month, and that's pretty much the cadence we're going to keep at Compass Games, to get 2 games out per month. And again, per our schedule, which you can see on screen for upcoming titles. And then for the month of September, it's Dawn's Early Light and the Korean War, which is that Joe Bukowski Victory Games Designer Signature Edition that we're really excited about. Obviously, the pre-order list is going to get updated after tonight because we have a new pre-order we're going to be talking about momentarily. And I want to remind everybody again, and you've been great at doing this, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that little talk to us, which is me waving to you. That's where you can leave us some feedback or send us your questions. I'll be sure to respond to you right away. And that helps us for our bi-weekly town hall meeting. So usually we get a lot of great comments and questions, and we always plan to include them in our town hall meetings every other week. And of course, we'll have our next town hall with Bill Thomas next Thursday night. So again, really looking forward to that. Want to let you all know right now, we'll cut right to the chase, and that is before we introduce our special guest. If you go to the pre-orders section, which I'm going to do right now, just to let you know we're live, and then I'll introduce Mike to everybody. You can see right here we have Prelude to Revolution. Just want to mention here, stating the obvious, is that we haven't gone officially to the art department yet. So you don't see any box art. You won't see any official artwork as far as maps or counters or cards, etc. Everything you're going to see is really based on a Vassal playtest kit that's been created. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Prelude to Revolution with Mike Willner here. So I'm just going to leave this page open. You'll notice there's a related product associated with it, which we'll be talking about as well. So excited to do that. In the meantime, I want to go ahead and introduce everybody to Mike Willner. So Mike, thanks for joining us tonight. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, John. Thanks.
I think it's been a little longer than expected. I think a few months ago, I was having conversations with you that we were going to launch your pre-order for Prelude to Revolution, and things sort of kept getting pushed back. So this day's been long in coming. So I'm really excited about that, and our discussion today about your new game that we now have on pre-order, obviously, as I showed. And before we get into your game, I always like asking just a few generic questions. So
Sure.
nothing too exciting, But actually, the reason we do it is we want to get some. Want to introduce you to everybody, and we have a lot of people that watches the playback, the recorded session. So I always want to make sure we introduce you because I believe you would consider yourself a new designer. This will be your first design, correct?
That's absolutely correct. First design for sure.
Okay, well, tell us where you're joining us from tonight and what you do during the day, if anything you can share with us about your profession or your background. Would love to hear about that.
Sure. Okay, so I'm joining you from lovely Brooklyn, New York. Tonight, it's a hot evening here in Brooklyn. I've been gaming since my older brother Mark introduced me to Tactics 2. I'm going to just peg that at about 50 years ago. And been an avid gamer since.
Long time. Did you stay in the hobby nonstop without a break, or did you take a break for college, or were you away from the hobby at all for a little bit, maybe?
Yes, I was. Well, first of all, no college. I was a high school dropout, so I gamed hard straight through. In fact,
wow, you did it right. You did it right. You got me beat on that one. That's great.
We played Panzer Blitz instead of going to school. So, but yeah, wife and kids put a pause on it for a while, but I resumed. So, and for my day job, I work in a large financial institution where I am involved in financial crime prevention. So we are looking to stop the bad guys from laundering money. So all of our Ozark friends and Breaking Bad friends and all of those.
I've got to watch the rest of that series. I watched the first 2 or 3 shows only, the pilot. I got to watch the rest of it. So that's you. That's you. That's your focus. Amazing. And actually, that will make sure everybody behaves and asks you nice questions.
That's right.
That's a nice double effect. So, okay, so great. So we got the basics covered about your background, Brooklyn, etc. I do believe, though, you have a really good playtest, or not a playtest group. We'll get the playtesting, but you have a good game club out where you're at, not too far from you.
Yes, I'd like to mention the Metropolitan Wargamers of New York City is in walking distance from my house, which is amazing. But it's a club of I think we're the only full-time premises, so the club affords 24/7 access. Members get keys. There are tables where we can put games under glass. So, for example, we've had at least 2 complete playthroughs of the campaign of Case Blue recently. We played Balance of Powers campaign through because we could leave it set up, and it's pretty awesome. So, if you're a wargamer and you're coming to New York City, you must come visit the club.
You're spoiled now. Has Mark Herman joined you at those sessions at all?
Mark doesn't come down. There's a couple of other clubs that meet sort of periodically on the evenings of the week and such. And if that suits some people better because it's a regular thing and they have regular arrangements, I believe Mark's involved with that. So no, we haven't had him down, though. A couple of our members know Mark from Lothies many years ago, and we're kind of in touch.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. So I'm going to throw a wild card question out at you. This is a question I have actually not asked some other designers, so you are special tonight. Okay. And I'm going to give you some time because I'm going to actually answer the question myself first because I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it off the spot. If you can answer it off the spot, you can do it. What is your favorite, most memorable gaming experience? Because you've said you've done this for 50 years. So there must absolutely be one incredible experience that just comes to your mind. And I'm going to give you some time here because I see you thinking. So I'll share mine. So mine was I was living in Zurich, Switzerland in the early 90s, and I got together with some Swiss friends and in Zurich, and he was a chef by trade, and we did a game of flat top as an all-nighter. So I was maybe almost not quite 30 yet. And to play a game like Flat Top, where it's literally, like they say, it's like flying a plane, hours and hours of just searching, nothing happening. And then a complete tear when things just go unbridled crazy. And literally what I remember about it best, besides being great friends, was that the food that was put out and what we had, like 2 a.m. And at 3 a.m. we had a big carrier strike action that took place, and I was loaded of caffeine, middle of the night, 3 a.m. and we are just screaming at the top of our lungs and probably sweating too. Just it was so intense. So that's just to eat up some time on the clock to give you time to think about it. So that was my most memorable gaming experience right there. How about
Well,
you?
well, I'll resist plugging my game by saying the first time I played my game on Vassal, played Prelude to Revolution, so I'll resist saying that. So, but really, the gaming experience that set the bar for me was playing the original Marshall Enterprises Vagram
Oh,
and
oh
laying
wow.
that thing out. And first thing was I always liked maps and all of that, and so hovering over this, I guess it was about 8x4 or 6x3, not quite sure, but it was at least 4 or 5 maps wide. It seemed. I don't have a clear memory, and it was that experience is now the bar for me. That's
Yeah.
kind of and also I learned a lot about because we played timed. You got 10. Now you have this huge number of units, but each
Yeah.
side got 10 minutes to move. So you really were the
You
most
only had
effective.
10 minutes to move. Oh, is that a house rule or?
No, I think it was actually a suggestion because what happens
Oh,
is you are forced to prioritize. So what have two things you learn is you say, I cannot like sit and fiddle with every single unit on the board. I have to see which part of the board is the most important, put most of my time there. And the other thing I learned was about things like divisional and core formations. Now, having a divisional formation, why do you need one? Because I could move one unit and just scoot the rest. So a lot of things about sort of large formation command and
yeah.
the period became clear to me. So all of that experience became sort of the bar. When I approach those experiences in the gaming, that especially Hex and Counter Wargaming, that does it for me.
Yeah, Deutsche Wahlgram's like a hen's tooth collector's item. I remember on eBay, and this goes back for me 10, 15 years ago, it would be several $100s easy, 400, 500,
Yeah.
just insane. So does that mean Napoleonic era basically is your number one era, historical era of interest because this was your favorite game? Did that do it for you for Napoleonics then?
I say Napoleonic, Civil War, American War of Independence, probably for like war games. Do
Yep.
it. Yep. And since the Battle for the Age of Reason series by Clash of Arms, sorry for mentioning a competitor, or I guess
No, no,
another
absolutely. No,
competitor.
it's totally not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. I think we should probably talk about Triumph of Chaos at some point related to your game
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
So,
that's going to have to come up because that's a big inspiration. But yeah, all of those games have brought me really close to the Hexism, Napoleonic games, and all that. But I guess they're all measured against that Vagram experience. And like you, it was an all-nighter and an all-dayer, and just went and went. It
yep.
was awesome.
Now
Good
let me
question.
ask you. Yeah, no, I wanted to ask that, and that's a great answer. Really interesting to know that. How do you still have your hard stop that we talked about earlier? So I'm going to watch the
Uh,
clock.
I have to be off by about 5 to 10 Eastern.
Okay, no problem. We're gonna stick to the clock. Not a problem at all. So what I'd like to do is let's so I think we covered some good background about yourself, Mike, and again, it's a pleasure to have you here. So what I'd like to do now is actually talk about a few things. So first thing I want to let everybody know, I like to try to do this when I can, but this was actually a Russian language program, a docudrama on the Russian Revolution. I'm not going to air a clip tonight because there was a problem with the transcripts coming through and they were a little bit mangled, and it's 100% in Russian language, spoken language. So that's not going to work for everybody. Maybe for yourself and a few others that know Russian or something, but not for me. So I just want to give a hat tip out. If you do a search on YouTube for the Russian Revolution, episode 1, it goes through the causal effects of the Russian Revolution, which is going to get to the heart of your topic.
Yes.
And again, just want to give a shout out. If anybody has about 20 to 25 minutes to burn, please check out on YouTube that series. Also, I understand this was the greatest influence on you as far
Absolutely.
as researching this game. We're going to be talking about the topic. So the Russian Revolution. Tell us a little bit about what this book meant to you.
Yeah, Professor Pipes. You read a lot about. He also wrote about the Russian Civil War, which follows this, and is the topic of several of the games. And the Revolution and the subsequent Civil War are probably some of the most confusing topics you can attempt to read about. There's so many players, so many factions, so many moving parts, so many events. Professor Pipes managed to put it all in perspective and put it together so you can actually read this and say, "Oh, I get it."
That's
Especially,
great. Yeah.
and additionally, he advances. He was the first, one of the first credible historians to advance the perspective that the Bolshevik the Russian Revolution in October 1917 was a coup d'état by the Bolshevik Party and not a popular revolution of any sort. And that just sounds like a nuance and a distinction, but actually, it's quite important, and an important perspective that he brought that a lot of subsequent historians picked up on and expand upon. So I had the opportunity to exchange emails with Professor Pipe before he passed away, and if I get the opportunity, I would certainly dedicate this game to his memory.
Oh, wonderful. That's a very touching thing to do. I actually researched Richard Pipes a little bit. I was so intrigued when doing a Google search how far back he goes as far as what he's contributed in terms of history and the influence he's had in political circles. I saw he was given an award by a president many years ago and seen very old pictures of him. So, yeah, sadly, I think he passed away just recently, 2 or 3 years ago. But very interesting. So thanks for sharing a little bit about, obviously we're going to have a bibliography to back your work, etc. But I just want to make sure we had a moment to share that about Richard Pipes and the influence it had on you. So obviously we're going to focus on Prelude to Revolution. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I think this game actually has some interesting roots, at least in terms of the game system. So maybe you can walk us through sort of the inception of this is not your game. So people, when they see your map, the Vassal map we're going to show in a moment, they might do a double take thinking it's the same map, but actually no. This is a game that's been shipping for about 2 or 3 years now from Compass. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this game, what we're looking at here?
Sure. That's not my game, but it's my jam. I love this game dearly and I'm endlessly impressed by it. So I will, and just to frame this, this game is the inspiration and the base system upon which Prelude to Revolution is based. So I had the opportunity to play it after I had attended Compass Expo in Cornwall, Connecticut a couple of years ago. And the designer, Marco, I apologize, I'm going to mispronounce it, Marco Poutre.
Yeah, good job. That's very good.
We've talked extensively. I'm very fortunate that he agreed to be the developer of the Prelude to Revolution game. So he and I have had quite a few opportunities to discuss. He took the concepts around Twilight Struggle. And Twilight Struggle, you have areas and you contest control for them at various levels of control. Then you score. And I think many people are familiar with that, and the cards drive lots of activity. He innovated several systems, paying for and placing individual cubes in these tracks. Each track representing an area is a much more fine-grained level of control. Instead of saying I have 1 or 2 or 3 strength points, you're sort of very constantly fluctuating number of cubes representing your influence. Requires a bit more strategic insight. Additionally, there's a distinction between just sort of, in this game, rural districts where it's farmers and merchants versus the urban districts where the government resides and where the parliament is. And since this game represents a struggle between the French Canadian farmer and poor British farmer types and the colonial government, it really manages to model that quite well. Scoring, as we know in Twilight Struggle, we're playing along and suddenly I drop my Score Africa card or Score Europe card, and then it goes. In this game, all scoring is out in the open. There are scoring tracks that progress as you roll dice that push them forward, and and cards influence which tracks will move. So you really are looking at how the scoring progresses and how you might influence it as it moves, and that means 2 things happen. 1, you can build your strategies around driving certain kinds of scoring. 2, your strategy can be disrupted because very disadvantaged scoring may be coming up. So as opposed to Twilight Struggle, where you say, gee, I bet John has the Score Europe card in his hand, I can see that that rural districts are going to score and you're going to rack up a lot of points. And as much as I want to do other stuff, I have to play against that. So the way the game kind of drives a lot of your, Marco came up with a bunch of really innovative ideas and systems which integrate so well and stand together so well that the game's great to play. It's fun. It's always dramatic. And as far as card-driven games goes, I don't think too many have captured my attention as thoroughly as this one has.
As being this is your first design, did you have the thought to do this game design before you got exposed to Prelude to Rebellion? I'm wondering and actually what was, and that's a bigger question. What was the trigger for you to go, now you've decided you're going to design games? What made that happen? What made that motivation for you happen?
It was a road to Damascus moment there. So I had always been clearly the late 19th and early 20th century Russian history, let's say from 1880 to say 1930, has always been an area of interest to me and quite fascinated by it. One game that stood out for me and riveted my attention was Triumph of Chaos by Dave Doctor, which really brings out, in my mind, both the chaos and the dynamics and the fluidity of the Russian Civil War that took place after the revolution, say 1918 to 21 or so. I'd always loved the game. The second edition is awesome and expanded. So all of that's, and at some point I actually thought, gee, wouldn't it be cool to have like a coin game of the Russian Revolution, and what would that be? And well, I'm not a designer. Then I played this game. I played Prelude to Rebellion. And I don't know why, but I just said, geez, this would be perfect for the Russian Revolution.
That made the light go off, and
it was
you're already going that way. But that was like, okay, now I've got my system. I've got the chassis now, and what I'm going to build. So that's pretty cool. So that this game really, so Marco had a direct impact on you for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I had no sense that I was even thinking of designing a game, but as soon as the idea started falling into place, I started talking about it with some guys at the club. And then, by the way, back to the club, having a club full of dedicated, hardcore, experienced gamers to bounce this stuff off of and get back ideas and bounce, and it really made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's sort of a challenge for you and for Compass is, given the topic for Lower Canada, it's not Eastern Front World War II, let's say, or American Civil War. So I think what's an interesting hurdle for us is the fact that a lot of people aren't familiar with this game, which means they're not going to be familiar with the game system. So all the things you've talked about now, what would probably be really interesting to them is sort of how it pulled you away from coin and standard CDGs and other mechanics, because you found this offered other things that you just found to be a better fit. So so that's more of a challenge, I think, for us, to really help get the word out. But the good news, which I foresee happening, is when your game's released, is I think that's going to also draw in more attention back to Prelude to Rebellion as a more of an obscure topic than Russian Revolution is. So I can see the compliment coming back to Marco as he's helping you as a developer with your current work. I think you're going to be also returning the favor to him with this game right here that we see.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. And then one thing I want to point out for everybody as well is there's not that much pressure on me to ask all these incredibly insightful questions, because, you have been around the block already. I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but on the left, the amazing Players Aid folks, Grant and Alexander, kudos to them. They did a great interview with you. It's a written interview and really very good and very in-depth questions. So this is where you'll definitely find out more about the system decisions, what's in the system precisely, because we're not going to have time, obviously, to get into all those details. But this article in Players Aid went surprisingly for me, it went extremely deep. And I'm not used to that. Usually, today everything's so instant gratification with the internet. You don't get very deep on things. But I want to say a compliment to you on the work you did with Alexander and Grant. So again, that's on the left side of the screen here. So everybody, please check the review out. We're really going to give you great insights into the game. And then, of course, we have wonderful Maurice Fitzgerald of Moe's Gaming Table and other things that he does during Console World Expo. This past March, he sat down with you for a few minutes, I think 25 minutes, or about 20 minutes. And you were here talking with him about Prelude to Revolution, and got into some interesting tidbits, explaining the game, explaining the map board a little bit. We're going to try to do that some more tonight. But I know we have limited time, and so there's a little pressure taken off me, and because I'm showing these things, because you know what, these are great resources. So if people want to dig in deeper, just like the bibliography and the YouTube docudrama series, check out these two pieces right here. You did a great job on them.
Thanks.
And I think you started last March of 2020 on the design. Is that about right, or the idea?
Yep.
So you've been busy. So what we have here is, and that was when you did Mo's interview. That was actually during Consum World Expo Dallas, our first annual Dallas event. So you can see the promotion. And as Compass, we want to make sure you had some play testing sessions. So how did the play tests? How has play testing worked out for you at conventions? And maybe even you can mention, since you have a Vassal module online, because I want to mention on the right side, that's your project site that you've been using. And if everybody looks at all those little circles along the top, just under the game title, Prelude to Revolution, there's a bunch of colored circles with initials. That is the list of contributors and project team members, some being play testers that you've been working with for over a year. It's pretty darn impressive. All those, that's a lot of people on the project right there. So hat tip to you for, you've obviously put a lot of work into this, as Marco's been helping you. So if you could share a little bit with us about the play testing, the development efforts, the project management, everything you've been doing behind the game.
Sure. So thanks. Yes. And I also must compliment and express gratitude to the folks down at the club. I won't name names because there's too many, and people who have joined on the base camp. And if I name names, I'm going to leave someone out, and that's not fair. So all of you has been critical to the process. Anybody who's thinking about designing a game as a new and first time and hopefully only time game designer.
Well, hopefully not. No, we expect more out of you.
Oh, I see. Well, the thing is, don't try to do it alone. If you got to gather people around you who are passionate about your idea, and also willing to contribute, and you're willing to take their contributions on. So the underlying and fundamental concepts in the Prelude system, which I'll use that term to refer to both Prelude to Revolution and also the predecessor game Prelude to Rebellion, is that the players, it's card driven. Players are given the opportunity, like a lot of card driven games, to play cards for events or for points.
Here's some cards right here. If you want to sort of explain, maybe I can make this a little bit bigger for everybody. If you want to walk them through some of the cards here really quickly.
Good. You have two types. There's fundamentally two types of cards. There's cards that go for each era. As you can see in the upper left, this one is the Great War era. There are 3 eras in the game. Years of Turmoil, the Great War, and the Collapse. So roughly corresponding to Years of Turmoil is like 1905 to 1913, the Great War 1914 to 16, and the Collapse is just 1917, because that's when the revolution took place. And we're not looking to simulate the revolution here. We're simulating the run up to. The types of cards, there's event cards, as you see here, which have an action point cost. You're going to recognize a lot of this. Action point costs, prerequisites, events that are specific to the card. Which faction? The faction here showing is for the revolutionaries. That's Marx, Engels, and Lenin. Right there, and maybe a little bit of historical text. We also have, there are some things which are such seminal events that we want to make sure they have an opportunity to occur. So there are key events, and there are also key personalities. Unlike other card games where these are mandatory, like if you get this card in your hand, you have to play it, like let's say some of the cards in For the People, or they're random in the deck. What happens is these cards are placed out during certain eras, like this one you can see comes out in the first turn, the early part of the Great War. And it's an option. It's something a player can pay to bring into play. So this war card automatically becomes available, but it doesn't automatically get played. Someone pays to play it. So conceivably, we could get through this game without the Russians entering World War I.
And this is Brian White's just making a comment. Thanks for joining us on YouTube tonight, Brian. Hey, Brian. So he says this is different than coin. He's pointing out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the players get a hand of cards. And you see, most important, you see in the upper right corner, the WA, that means World Affairs. There's 4 scoring tracks: Urban Districts, World Affairs, the Duma, which is the parliament, and organizations, which represents a level of political organization. So that's every turn after you play a card, you roll the die associated with that upper right side. There's a 50% chance that particular track, each one corresponds to a scoring track. So if I roll a die and World Affair comes up, my scoring track advances 1 tick, and when it advances four spots, then that track scores. So it's always kind of running up. When you roll that die, there's only a 50% chance that World Affairs is going to come up. But what you can also see is all the other 3 tracks are represented on the other 3 sides. So you always have
I should probably show the map. Here's a map. Does this help? Since you're talking about tracks, there's tracks here, which I understand these tracks aren't necessarily connected at all. Like in terms of proximity, these connect independently and have completely different effects and attributes.
Yeah, the idea is, let's just talk about one of them. Let's talk about urban districts. That's modeling how much influence you have in the various neighborhoods and areas and important key locations in the capital, in Petrograd. So as you place cubes or mobilize your side, you're either the government or the revolutionary. As you mobilize your cubes into your side, if you have more than your opponent, the scoring track moves in your favor. The number of victory points that you could get moves in your favor and increases. So if you dominate and have a lot of these areas under your control, you're going to potentially get a lot of victory points. Then every time the urban district comes up on one of these scoring die, the little track in the upper corner here, the one that says scoring track where you see UD in there, that advances 1. And when that finally gets to the box that says score, then there's a procedure where you score that track. So you actually, 1 die roll is going to advance it 1 step.
No pressure. Marco's on. Just
And
the developers on. Give you some.
I owe the world's greatest designer, Marco.
There you go, the designer of Prelude to Rebellion, which got you designing. So very big. So great to have Marco on.
So the key concept here is your play on the board influences the number of victory points you can get. And the die rolling pushes that victory point towards actually scoring. And this being a design of chaos and uncertainty, before you actually score, there's a little procedure that goes on that depends on just how unstable your political situation is, may wind up swinging the board state a bit one way or another.
So remind me of this. It's a 2-player game. First of all, it's designed as a 2-player game, card driven, etc. And the 2 sides are, you got the government, and then you've got
the revolutionary.
Now, one thing that's interesting that I caught, if everybody does this, they'll see the same thing. It's very important to watch the video with Mo's gaming table and also your interview with the player's aid. You talk about, even as you have your own side, you still have to manage factions and extreme influences. So you're not out of the woods. You've got to deal with your own problems, if you will, with whatever side you're on, because there's factions within your side. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I found that an interesting dynamic you mentioned.
Yeah, this was one of the most difficult systems to work out. So you're the revolutionary. Each side has 2 factions. Each faction has 2 parties. You have your moderate party and your extremist party. So to be specific, for example, as the revolutionary player in the Duma, which is the parliament, you've got your moderates, who are socialists, who are basically well-meaning, social reform-minded and semi-revolutionary types who want to work through the system and improve things for everybody. Then you have the Bolsheviks, who basically want to destroy it, burn it all down, and start again, and then begin a world revolution. So the way the game is structured, and the government has the equivalent. You have the liberals, who are willing to work with socialists and make some modifications, maybe even push for a constitutional monarchy. And then you have the monarchists, who are like, we want the czar to have as much power as possible.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish, and then I know we're short on time, so I have some questions for you when you're done. Go ahead and finish your thought.
So a key challenge in this game is, as you strengthen your extremists, you get tactical benefits and short-term benefits, but in the long term, there are all kinds of penalties that accrue by having your extremist party being too strong. One of which the game can end. either end in a draw automatically if the monarchists get too powerful and the autocracy is reimposed, or the Bolsheviks get too out of hand and drive up their track to the point where there's a coup and the game ends and there's a scoring sequence. So you have to always manage, and the rest of the system is very much placement control and a lot of interesting twists. Card games has some interesting systems, but I think the core of it is, even as a player, the revolutionary player, for example, as you progress, your own extremists start driving your agenda, where you'd much rather be doing something else, but suddenly you got to go get the Bolsheviks under control.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that caught me when I was researching this for tonight. That I thought that was very intriguing. What I also found intriguing, which I want to bring up quickly, was there's an added flavor component to the game besides the two sides, which is the Duma. And working that in. So could you maybe explain what is the impact of having the Duma and how does it impact play for both sides?
So the Duma was the parliament that the Tsar was forced to constitute in 1905 or 1906. It represents the political center of the game. What happens in the Duma is there's points to be scored there by play, just like in all the other areas. You control more parts of the Duma, but there are several other things that happen in there. There are periodically Duma resolutions where there are basically the more control and the better your chances of passing a die roll test, a mobilization test, it's called. You can garner victory points or extra cubes on the board. Additionally, there's a lot of cards that let you do things if you have a majority in the Duma, if you have developed an organization around certain parties in the Duma. So there's a lot of sorry, Jack, no mock, no. You'll have to wait till we have the Civil War.
Jack wants to know if where's the anarchists? Come on now.
Not yet.
Not yet, right?
They're still in units on the Romanian front shooting at Germans.
There we go. Okay.
so the Duma provides sort of this political center of the game where you vie for control. You get to call votes. You get to call elections. So you can garner points and cubes through controlling it. So generally speaking, the revolutionary tends to try and dominate the urban districts to develop sort of grassroots support, and the government tries to dominate the Duma, so to drive a political agenda, more or less.
And what I want to show here was obviously one of the components that helps with replayability and variability and chaos, as you mentioned, is there's a lot of game cards. There's a lot of cards in the game. So here's a sampling. Obviously, this is just a pre-artwork playtest style cards, but nice to see a nice mix for those that can see this or those watching the recording. They can probably zoom in. But again, there's a lot more cards than this. But again, this helps with the variability and the tense action and the strategizing that's gonna happen in the game. And then there's an interesting question here I want to share with you also from Joe Yaus that I want to share. So because you're talking about the buildup, when things basically fell apart. Could the Russian Civil War had been simultaneous with the revolution rather than coming afterward? Is that possible in the game as far as timing of the revolution and then still these other actions you're doing taking place?
So I'll comment that the game's not a military simulation and it's a political simulation. The politics around the Civil War couldn't, I don't think, have evolved while the Tsar was still sitting on the throne and while the Duma still existed as a semi-parliamentary body, and while World War I was going on. I think the strong driver that, the unifying driver historically that kept Russia together as long as it did was the fact that they were fighting the Germans. Let's not forget, much of Russia was being occupied by Germany at that point. Most of Western Russia. So I don't think that those events would be simultaneous.
And I know your focus was on the build-up and
the prelude.
The prelude to what and the struggle. I assume for the players, does it get emotional? Like you can sort of feel it getting away from you. Does it have that sort of a feeling to it? Where it's just out of your control?
Every time. I'll mention that there's the separate deck for each era. So let's take the deck that is modeled for the Years of Turmoil. I forget the exact numbers, but there's there will
it's on
be
the website. It's on the webpage probably how many per deck anyway, so people can look it up.
But there's about 20% more cards than there are cards that are going to get played. So there's always cards that you're not going to play for each era. So there's always going to be a mix of different cards each time you play the game, and that's intended. Any card we felt must be modeled became a key event or a key personality.
Great. And then as a reminder for everybody, again, just to be, I want to be respectful of your time tonight, Mike. And again, just really excited to be able to get this game now available for pre-order. So again, I invite everybody to get, a lot of good information is actually provided about the game on the website. So you'll see right away, 2-player card driven. You can see it's related to Prelude to Rebellion. So if you click on Prelude to Rebellion, which is the game from Marco, you'll see then Prelude to Revolutions. It's like, they're intertwined. They're both, one having the influence on the other. So again, I definitely want to invite everybody to check out Prelude to Revolution. We've got more information, as you can see here, around the background to what's being covered, talking around the three different time periods, as you mentioned, gets into all the components, etc. So I think it's a really good summary about the game, but really, I want to really point everybody in the direction. And what I need to do is I need to add links to this product page, to the player's aid, written interview with you, and also with Mo's Gaming Table with Maurice Fitzgerald's interview with you, that video. I'm going to go ahead and add it to this product page at the very bottom. It makes a lot of sense to do that, because I think it's really compelling information to get deeper into the game. So I really appreciate that.
So, John, if you don't mind, I did want to make sure I got to mention one thing. First of all, again, much gratitude to Marco, to members of the club, and everybody who's play tested. We have a vessel. I'm always interested in gaming this with people and getting their feedback. So if there's anybody who might be watching this and wants to, I don't know if it's okay for me to put my email out there. Or what would be the protocol, John? But
I can. Well, what I can do is I can even add the email to the recording. So when people go out on YouTube and they, what I can do is I can go ahead and type your email address if you could right now, Mike, and I'll display it so that way people can see it, and then it will be right on the video. Everybody can see. So if you type it in just a normal comment section where everybody else's comments are showing up.
Yeah, I don't say. Okay, so while I'm putting that there, what I really wanted to get across was just like when I was talking about, I'm going to have to put it in private because I don't see a place to put it.
Oh, okay.
The experience I had described with Vagram, where it was a very connected experience to both the geography of the game and the feel, being under pressure from command control, and having to really respond to the urgencies the game presented. The intent of this game, first of all, is not to simulate the events, because it's not really reasonable or possible to do it that way, but to simulate. It's intended to be more of a cinematics and a feel simulation. Yes, there's a lot of historic specifics in there. We do our best to keep it historically grounded. But what I'm hoping players will experience is the deterioration and slide downhill and the accelerating descent into anarchy, as in the title, that starts on turn one. So the first turn or so is just sort of like card driven. Yeah, I'm placing things, I'm getting points, I'm getting stuff, I'm building organizations, and that kind of proceeds. All of a sudden the Great War starts, and events like Rasputin or the Tsar takes command of the armies kick off, and military disasters, and things get worse and worse, and tracks start moving on their own, and victory point tracks start moving on their own, where you have to turn away from your strategy and say, oh my goodness, this track's getting out of hand, I'm going to lose the game, or there's going to be a forced draw, or he's going to score a ton of points. And then when the collapse comes, the intent is now it gets even more difficult. While as cautioned by the designer of the system, I still have to reward smart play and not throw away the player's decisions just because the game goes crazy. So that's the balance. If you played smart and you hit the collapse, you'll probably do well. But it's going to be a bumpy roller coaster when we get into that part of the game. And both players are going to be looking to get to the end, either force a draw, force an end, force the Bolshevik coup, Bolsheviks to have their coup and take over the government, have something that ends the game while they still have some kind of edge in the final scoring sequence.
And then, did I get your email address right?
www.mtg. Yep. Thank you. And so I'm hoping that's the experience players have. They get a little exposure to the topic. Maybe if they're interested in it, they're motivated to learn more. And I'll answer Jack 1 second. And they're motivated to learn more. And that if they get that experience, I've seen it almost every time I played, where at some point players are staring at their hand and staring at the board and shuffling cards and scratching their head. I'm like, that's what I want. I want people to be in the throes of conflict and agony when they're trying to figure out what to do next. And I think we accomplished a lot of that.
Sounds like you accomplished that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, Jack asked you this question about game length for experienced players.
I expect we're going to talk about something similar to Twilight Struggle and Prelude to Rebellion, about 3, maybe 4 hours, depending.
Channeling Marco, yeah.
Yeah, I'm channeling Mac. It's going to be about 3 hours. No. Yeah, and actually, we actually took a look at the design and said, okay, this, there's a lot of die rolling in this subsystem. Do we really need it, or could we slim that down to just give the players more focused experience and get them through the game?
Wonderful, wonderful. And then let's see here. I just want to share just a little tidbit, since we were talking earlier with you, Mike, about memorable gaming experience.
Yeah.
Joe Yels was kind enough to share his 9-day marathon of Scorched Earth back in the 90s with 5 other guys. That's awesome, Joe. So that's an intense gaming experience. That's sort of like yours in a way, Mike, about the whole big Napoleonic, and that was new on the scene, big monster game. Scorched Earth came out a little bit later, I think, because it was DNO, then Unentscheiden.
That's right.
So
Drunk nach Hosting wasn't enough for you, was it? Huh?
so Joe says Youst is hardcore. So absolutely. Right. So say this was wonderful again. Just to keep watching the clock. I'm really excited about having Prelude to Revolution now available on pre-order. The plan is to move it to getting the artwork started fairly soon at some point. So later this year we'll be working on the artwork. I'd say realistically, just to let everybody know, this is not like a pure hex-based war game. It's going to have the full mounted map. It's going to have like the Euro style pieces, etc. So this will be printed overseas, which also takes a few months to the schedule. So this will be I'd say look at this as potentially an early first half release for 2021. And God willing, 2021 goes better than 2020 so far.
It won't be hard.
Else we're going to be rolling like in Revolution. It's going to be the end game is going to come too soon. So no, really excited to finally have that game available for pre-order, Mike. And again, I want to remind everybody to check out those other articles. I'll link them on your product page so they can see your other interview and your written interview as well. But again, it was a pleasure to having you here, and I want to give you the last word before we shut down.
Thanks, John. And first of all, I have to acknowledge Compass Games being an enthusiastic and engaged publisher, I guess is the right term. And all the encouragement and real genuine enthusiasm kind of gave me the courage to go from maybe I could do this to, hey, let me try this. That's first. Several people asked about solo play. Obviously, there's all kinds of systems which give you advice on how to play sort of God mode solo for CDGs, and this is at its essence a CDG. So any of those would be applicable. But giving some serious thoughts that since each era has such a distinct characteristic, I'm feeling like once I get nailed down on a few more design points, that coming up with a sort of a semi-bot of some sort to play the collapse, for example. Say, okay, you're now getting to the, you just had the Tsar resign and now it begins, and one side or the other has is the automatic side. I think that might be doable, and I'm going to give that some thought once stuff is nailed down. So I'm hoping to provide some at least guidance on that. I
know. I look forward to that. I know it's going to be a tough ask or a big ask, but as you wrap up the system and development is wrapping up, I know you're going to take a close look if there's any way to add any enhancements for solitaire play. So completely understand. Well, Mike, we finally did it after all this time,
Yeah.
and I know it took much longer than I had wished. So I'm so happy we did this tonight. I hope everybody really enjoyed the episode. I think it was very intriguing. It's a very intriguing design. I'm very interested in the period myself, and I have to read the book you mentioned that we talked about earlier. Absolutely. So you were really excited about your game, and I believe also we're looking forward to other titles in the Prelude series as well, also by other designers. So we're going to see this. I think we're going to see this game system and series grow, which I'm also very excited about. And again, I want to thank you for taking the big step into game design for the first time, and having 20, 30 plus people involved with you really says a lot about your communication style and being somebody that people enjoy supporting and working with. So I want to say kudos to you, and looking forward to great things from you. So thanks again, Mike.
Thank you very much.
And I want to thank everybody online. Thank everybody for being our live viewership tonight. Really appreciate it. As you know, we'll be returning next Thursday for our town hall meeting with Bill Thomas. And that will be Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central. And as an added bonus, we're going to start marketing / bribing people to let you know we're going to give away 1 or 2 games. Every time we do a town hall, we're giving away 1 or 2 games. That should bring in at least another 10 or 20 people, I think, hopefully. But no, it's a pleasure to have you tonight, Mike. And again, I look forward to seeing everybody next Thursday for the town hall. Then we'll be back for episode 38. Our next episode of Compass Games Live will be 2 weeks from today. So again, everybody, really excited about Prelude to Revolution, and good night. Bye-bye.